Galw'r aelodau I.
I call members to order, and the first item on our agenda this afternoon is questions to the First Minister, and the first question is from Llywydd. Thank you, Llywydd. What discussions has the Welsh Government had with Arla following its decision to close the site in Llandernog?
Well, the Cabinet Secretary for Energy Planning and Rural Affairs has written to the Managing Director of Arla to request an urgent meeting to discuss all opportunities the company may be considering and to see how the Welsh Government may be able to assist.
Thank you for that response. I know it's early days, but I would like to ask whether the government would be willing to consider maximising the potential of that site by looking at attracting others to operate from that particular site in future, because the concern is that if the site is mothballed, it closes everyone else out in terms of the opportunity to process milk in that area. And we don't want a situation such as the one we saw in Whitland in the west of Wales many years ago, where the site was vacant for many years, which meant in turn that it wasn't possible to process milk in that area. And that's important, of course, not only because we need processing capacity in Wales for all the reasons that I've outlined previously in my question to the Cabinet Secretary for the Economy last week, but also, of course, there is a commitment by Arla to continue to take milk from farmers in the North East, but for how long will they be willing to transfer that to Scotland and to Devon without ultimately deciding that it's not cost effective?
Well, I understand that the Cabinet Secretary has had a meeting over the phone this afternoon. One of the things that was being considered, what opportunities there are for this site ultimately. I remember how difficult it was to ensure that the land was released in Whitland. I remember that I was the minister at the time to ensure that that happened, and it could have stood there mothballed for years in the town, and that's not something that people wanted to see, and it was something that they wanted to see being solved and the land being used. So there are two things: looking at the opportunities for the site itself, and second, to ensure that there is support available for the people who work there, and that will be available through the REACT scheme, and Business Wales is working with the company to see what opportunities there are.
Mark Isherwood.
Diolch, Llywydd. Last week, responding to me, the Cabinet Secretary referred to the Farmers Union of Wales statement that Arla was set to retain the site while potential opportunities for other products are explored, and that he would be taking that further with them. I've since been told by one source that other opportunities for the site simply refer to recommencing production should tariffs be imposed on cheese imports post-Brexit. But we also saw over the weekend reporting that Starbucks has struck a 21-year licensing deal with Arla to manufacture, distribute and market its range of premium ready-to-drink milk-based coffees across Europe, the Middle East and Asia, which potentially opens wider opportunities. Perhaps you won't be able to tell us until you've spoken to the Cabinet Secretary after his discussion, but will you inform the Assembly whether and what discussions have been had in that context, and whether this is simply restricted to tariffs post-Brexit, or whether there are new opportunities linked to the publicised new contracts with third parties?
Well, it is early days yet, but certainly we will explore any possibility that will lead to a positive outcome for the area, and that is something the Cabinet Secretary will continue to do together with officials.
Michelle Brown.
Presiding Officer. First Minister, what steps did Welsh Government take prior to the Arla announcing the closure to try and convince them not to close the plant in Denbighshire?
Well, these announcements often come with little or no warning. What we do, of course, in those circumstances is two things. First of all, to make sure that Business Wales looks to discuss the future with the company, and secondly, of course, to provide support for affected employees, including through the REACT scheme, in order to help them to identify alternative sources of employment. It isn't always the case that where closures are announced or proposed, because it is under consultation at the moment, that we get substantial or sometimes any notice.
Question 2, Jane Bryan.
What is the Welsh Government doing to tackle alcohol abuse?
We're investing almost 15 million a year in our substance misuse agenda, and within this we're undertaking a range of actions to tackle alcohol abuse. That includes supporting services which are commissioned by area planning boards, and also, of course, later this afternoon, introducing the Public Health Minimum Price for Alcohol Bill.
Thank you, First Minister. Last week, Gwent Police announced the introduction of a scheme where first-time offenders and low-level crimes, including drunk and disorderly, will be given the chance to attend a course rather than face court. The course will be offered to individuals at the discretion of the police and no cost to the public, rather like the speed awareness course. Gwent Police are the first force in Wales to offer such a scheme as part of their wider strategy to tackle alcohol problems, reduce reoffending and ease pressure on the criminal justice system. Gwent Drug and Alcohol Service, a charity providing support and advice for individuals and families, have welcomed this scheme. Can the First Minister set out how the Welsh Government is supporting substance misuse services to increase awareness of the dangers of excessive alcohol consumption, and how will the Welsh Government work with the police and others to reduce alcohol-related crime?
I think that's a very good idea. I mean, when I first started many years ago as a lawyer, it was often the case that where we had two young men, it was inevitably young men, who might have been fighting with each other in drink on the Kingsway in Swansea, which in those days was quite a venue for such things. If it was felt they wouldn't trouble the police or the courts again, they were often bound over, which meant they didn't have a criminal conviction. They were scared, frankly, and it scared them from coming back into court, and it was, in effect, a way of ensuring their good behaviour. This goes a step further, because it helps people to understand the effects of alcohol and alcohol abuse. In some ways, I support it's the extension of the speed awareness courses that people, not myself, I had, but some people have found themselves part of. It's a good way of educating people. If we can educate people out of behaviour, then that's better than punishing them without addressing the root cause of that behaviour.
Mohammed Ashkar.
Presiding Officer, in April, it was announced that an alcohol ban will be trialled in a section of the Principality Stadium for Wales Autumn Rugby Internationals. This follows complaint about the behaviour of drunk people spoiling games for other fans, which included a disabled person being subjected to a tirade of verbal abuse. Will the First Minister join me in welcoming this move to tackle alcohol abuse at rugby internationals? And will he be committed to discussing this with other sporting bodies with a view to extending the ban to other sports and venues where alcohol abuse is a problem in Wales?
I think there are two issues here in the stadium. First of all, the behaviour of some supporters. I mean, drunkenness has been part of crowds for many, many decades. That's not an excuse, of course, for the way some people behave. If people behave in a way that is obnoxious or breaches public order, then stewards should be informed and those people should be warned, and if they don't take heed of the warning, removed from the ground. Second point is many people complain that they're up and down their feet all the time as people go back and forth to the bars in order to buy alcohol. It seems to me that people don't need to buy alcohol throughout the game in order to enjoy the game, and I think this is an important pilot, if I can call it that, that's being pioneered in order to see what the effect will be.
Questions now from the party leaders. Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Can the First Minister confirm whether or not the Labour Party supports our membership of the European Economic Area?
It is one option that we need to look at, and that is something as a government we have done. It's why I went to Norway, indeed, to see how the situation in Norway worked. An interesting model, not one that fits Wales exactly, but nevertheless, if Norway can work to a model like that, then I see no reason why the UK can't construct its own model.
We are running out of time, First Minister, and you have described Labour's position as flexible. Now, there's nothing flexible about £5 billion being wiped off the Welsh economy. There's nothing flexible about Welsh jobs and wages disappearing and never returning. There's nothing flexible about rolling the dice on our biggest international market for agriculture, steel and over 60% of all Welsh exports. Even the joint white paper securing Wales's future states that the least damaging option for Wales is inside the European Economic Area. We co-authored that report on the understanding that you wanted to stand with us against an extreme Tory Brexit. Why are you abandoning your own analysis? And do you believe that your Westminster leader is right to clear the path for the Tories to pull us out of the single market?
Well, look, I'm the First Minister of Wales. I'm not responsible for what happens at Westminster. What I can say is this: our position has not changed. Membership of the EEA is an important option that needs to be kept open. What is absolutely non-negotiable to my mind, and I know she'll agree with this, is that we need to stay within the customs union. And secondly, of course, to have full and unfettered access to the single market. The position hasn't changed from when we both authored that document.
You are the First Minister of Wales. You are also a member of the Labour Party, and I would imagine that you should have some influence. Now, Plaid Cymru MPs will tomorrow vote to save jobs and our economy by staying in the European Economic Area. Unlike Labour, we will stand up to the Tories and give it our utmost to stop an extreme Tory Brexit that will be so disastrous for Wales. If you let your party drag us out of the single market, you will be ignoring your own white paper, your own experts, your own analysis. In fact, you'll be ignoring members of your own cabinet. Both the Labour MP for Pontypridd and your own Cabinet Secretary for Local Government put it perfectly when they said that Labour has created an open goal for the Tories and Wales will be damaged as a result. So what will it be, First Minister? Will you back the comments of the MP for Pontypridd and your Cabinet Secretary, or will you continue to toe the London Labour line, putting the interests of your own party before the interests of your own country?
Well, it's an extraordinary comment, because in order to provide any evidence at all to back that up, she would have to show that somehow I have opposed membership of the EEA. I have not, nor has the government. Secondly, that somehow I am opposed to remaining in the customs union, when in fact I'm one of its staunchest advocates, because I know full well what would happen in Ireland if that were to happen. Thirdly, as she will know, I have always argued, as has she, for full and unfettered access to the single market. The Welsh Government's position has not changed, and we will continue to make the case to those elsewhere in the UK who are members of our party. But we are in government in Wales. Our position is clear. The position has not changed when we authored the white paper, and we make it absolutely clear. Wales's future belongs in the UK, which he does not believe. Secondly, within the customs union, to my mind, within the single market as well, because that means full and unfettered access to the single market. Not within the EU, because people voted for that not to happen. But it doesn't mean that we need to have a chaotic Brexit based on flag-waving nationalism, which is what some of the Conservative Party advocate, rather than a sensible, pragmatic Brexit that works for Wales. That's what we want, and I hope that's what she wants.
Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Davis.
Presiding Officer, First Minister, last week the Chief Executive of Qatar Airlines made some very unhelpful and disparaging remarks about whether a woman would be able to fulfil his role. You, as First Minister, have rightly identified that you, as a government, and I'm sure everyone in this chamber, want Wales to be the most feminine-friendly country and allow pathways to every opportunity in Wales, irrespective of whatever sex you are. What representations did you make to the Chief Executive of Qatari Airlines about these comments, given that they are a strategic partner of yours, and not only that, you have put a lot of public money available to that airline to develop the routes into Cardiff Airport?
Well, clearly, I don't agree with his words. He is the Chief Executive of an airline, not the head of a government. We will continue to make the case, both within the UK and beyond, to ensure that equality becomes something that is entrenched in societies around the world.
Sadly for that answer, First Minister, you give an indication that you made no representations whatsoever to the Chief Executive or the airline about these remarks. If you were a small business in Wales or medium-sized business in Wales, I'm sure that given the social contract that you've developed, you would be obviously demonstrating your dislike of the comments that were made and withdrawing that support from that small or medium-sized business. Another indication of the double standard here in Wales is the report today around Pinewood and the money that the Welsh Government made available to Pinewood to develop the facility in St Mellons. You talked of at the time in 2014 that there was the potential of £90 million to come into the Welsh economy. There was the potential for 2,000 jobs to be created by this development. We know about 50 jobs have been created, and at the moment there's a paper loss of about £9 million according to the Auditor General's figures. What's gone wrong, First Minister?
Well, first of all, around about just over £4 million has been recouped, but many projects still in progress. You wouldn't expect the whole lot to be recouped in one fell swoop. These are long-term projects, and the money is recouped over a longer period. I just wonder, I have some comments in front of me here, which I wonder if he agrees with. The addition of the globally recognised Pinewood Production Company to Wales's already rich film production industry is very welcome. An increasing number of blockbuster films are being shot at locations across Wales, and Pinewood's new base will offer even more opportunities to see Wales on film, from which the whole country would benefit. This very welcome announcement is further evidence of Wales's growing reputation as an ideal venue for filmmakers with the right skills mixed to tantalise future cinema goers and movie fans. I agree with those comments. They came from his own party, Susie Davis.
Were made in light of your assertion that this investment could bring in 2,000 jobs, of which we know only 50 have been delivered, and potentially £90 million into the Welsh economy. Who wouldn't welcome such a proposition? But what we've seen with your management and your government's management of this particular bid is that you have failed to deliver any one of those targets that you set in 2014. But the point that I identify Qatari Airlines, where you have said nothing, the point I identify with Pinewood, another big internationally recognised company, is if you're a small business in Wales and you look at these big companies getting the money and then you're discounted from accessing the support of Welsh Government because you've made such detestable comments in Qatari's case or Pinewood's overestimation of the gains to the Welsh economy, you'd be scratching your head today and asking, what is the Welsh Government for? Isn't it the case, First Minister, that during your entire time as First Minister, you've promised much and delivered little?
Unemployment, 4.4%. Yeah, historically at a low level. Contrast that with the Tory years, when it was continuously in double figures. The destruction they wrought is there for all to see. We see a complete lack of ambition from the Conservative benches, bereft of ideas, no ambition for our country, not interested in investment projects. Now he seems to be saying we should withdraw support from Qatari Airways. So let that go, because they wanted to close the airport anyway, let's be honest. They didn't care whether the airport closed or not, and then jumped onto the bandwagon when the airport started to be successful. And he accuses us of mismanagement. Have a look at the way you've dealt with the railways. Have a look at the shambles you have made of the railways. It's a disgrace what the Tories have done to the railways. The money that's been hosed away, billions of pounds over the years on a service that is substandard. Contrast that with what we've done as a government, delivering the best railway service ever for the people of Wales over the next few years. You look at employment, you look at unemployment figures, how low they are. You look at the fact that we've had 30 years of foreign direct, the best figures of 30 years of foreign direct investment. You look at the fact that we bought an airport in 2013, which he opposed. They wanted us not to buy the airport, they wanted to leave it closed. And now it's up by 50% in terms of passenger numbers. We have intercontinental links, and he accuses us of not doing enough for Wales. Have a good long look at yourselves and the destruction you've wrought as a party.
Leader of the UKIP group, Caroline Jones.
First Minister, last week there were some comments in the media with regards to English prisoners in Welsh prisons. Normally I wouldn't raise this as a matter because the issue of prisons is not devolved to Wales. However, these comments allegedly came from a member of your government. The Cabinet Secretary for Local Government and Public Services is believed to have said that Park Prison in our region, constituency, should not be used to house English prisoners. First Minister, can you clarify your government's position on this issue? And do you believe that prisons in Wales should only house Welsh prisoners?
Well, firstly, the Cabinet Secretary is clear that he did not say to use those words. And secondly, well, no. I mean, clearly, it can't be the case that only Welsh prisons can be in Welsh prisons, because there are some prisons that don't exist in Wales that need to house Welsh prisoners. Category A prisons, for example, we don't have a women's prison either. So we couldn't create some kind of self-contained prison system under current circumstances, because that would mean that would affect us more than anybody.
Thank you for clarifying that, First Minister. As you've rightly said, we have no women's prison in Wales and not a single Category A prison. In fact, the prisons are severely overcrowded in Wales. Wales has 4,747 prisoners, and only across the 5 prisons has an operational capacity of 3,700. So a large number of Welsh prisoners are incarcerated in Welsh prisons hundreds of miles from home. And this is believed to be a significant factor in self-harm and suicide. So in your government's submission, to the Commission of Justice. You appear to be making the case for prisons to be devolved, and is this the case? And if so, would the Welsh Government support building new prisons in Wales to relieve the overcrowding and the safety issue regarding staff, the self-harm of prisoners, and to house prisoners closer to home in relation to rehabilitation?
Well, we do think the devolution of prisons, along with the rest of the criminal justice system, should be considered for devolution. It would take some time because clearly we've had an integrated system with England for a long time. But it simply isn't enough for us to say, well, we will take control of the prisons and carry on with the same policy as before. There's an opportunity now for us to look at a new system of penal policy and in order to make sure that we have a policy that's tailored for the needs of Wales. And that, to my mind, includes looking at different types of prisons, their sizes, their success in terms of reforming prisons, and that's all that's all an important part of consideration of a Welsh penal policy should prisons be devolved.
Thank you for that, First Minister. I'm sure we can all agree that in the interest of safety of staff and prisoners regarding self-harm, that something does need to be done on the capacity of staff as well, for the staff to be increased in order to provide a safe environment and in order to help with rehabilitation and prevent reoffending. So, regardless of where the responsibilities over prisons lie, the Welsh Government has a role to play in the rehabilitation, as you've just said, and an effort through the provision of health services, education, housing and employment issues. So, First Minister, I'm yet to be persuaded that there is a case for devolution of the justice system, prisons in particular, as I don't believe we can go it alone. However, it is clear that there has to be greater cooperation between the Welsh Government and Westminster here. So what discussions have you had with the UK Government about improving access to rehabilitation services in Welsh prison and the impact of overcrowding, which eventually helps aids reoffending? So, regarding staff shortages and the impact on rehabilitation of prisoners, can you please answer those questions? Thank you.
Well, it is tricky because many services that are provided within prisons are devolved services. And it's not the easiest fit to make with a non-devolved service and a devolved service in order to provide those services. We've done it, but there will be easier ways of doing it. Well, just going it alone, I mean, Northern Ireland has a prison system, so does Scotland, so for that matter, does Isle of Man. And Jersey and Guernsey. It's not entirely self-contained, and there will always be, to my mind, a case for some of the most dangerous prisoners perhaps to be housed in one or two places, or three probably, around the whole of the UK, rather than us doing it in Wales. We have to pay for those prison spaces, but the number of offenders in that category is actually quite low. So it may well be that we may not want to pursue the option of a Category A prison in Wales. But there's no reason, in principle or in theory, why we couldn't run the justice system ourselves, given the fact that far smaller entities such as Northern Ireland have been doing it, well, for nearly 100 years.
Question
3 is withdrawn. Question 4, Paul Davies. Will the First Minister make a statement on the future of health services in West Wales?
Well, Aelodau'r University Health Board is currently consulting on its proposals to transform community and hospital services in West Wales. May I encourage everyone with an interest to engage in the consultation and to have their say in helping to shape future services for the region.
First Minister, I'm sure you're aware of my opposition to the current proposals of the Aelodau'r University Health Board, bearing in mind that each of the three options proposed by the Health Board will lead to the downgrading of Withybush Hospital, which is unacceptable to the people I represent. Do you therefore share my concerns and the concerns of the people of Pembrokeshire that there is no option in the consultation which would safeguard services at Withybush Hospital? And do you agree with me that any decisions on the future of health services in West Wales must respect the views of the people that those services serve?
Well, it's vital, of course, that there is a wide-ranging consultation that's happened up till now. Almost 1,964 questionnaires, online questionnaires, have been completed. Over 500 postal questionnaires as well. Their meetings have taken place and they've been well attended. And what's important to remember, of course, is that what's been placed in the document itself has been developed with doctors, nurses and staff and people who provide care, representatives of patient groups and their partners as well. So it's not something that's political in nature. It's not something that's been written by someone sitting in an office. It's been put together by someone who works in the health service. So it's vital that people do take their part in this. I'm not expressing an opinion, and the member wouldn't expect me to do so. But it is vital that people do express their opinions about what structure they want in West Wales.
Simon Thomas.
Thank you, Llywydd. You will be aware that the Aelodau'r Health Board consultation is based on improving services in the community, and that is the foundation of an announcement made by the government earlier this week in bringing health and care closer together. But the reality is that people have heard these rumours in the past, and the truth on the ground is that the waiting list is 5 years for an NHS dentist in southern Ceredigion. You have to phone in the morning for GP surgery appointments, used often in terms of managing access to primary care. Wouldn't it make more sense that the Health Board at least show the residents of the Hywel area that they can do these basics right before they start to talk about things such as castles in the air, such as new hospitals?
Well, no, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a new hospital. In principle, I think that's something that is being considered. I want to see hospitals being opened across Wales, but what's important is that the structure is the right one. With doctors, of course, there's no reason why people should phone doctors in the morning. It's not for the Health Board to do that. There are several surgeries across Wales that don't demand that they do that. So that's the choice of the surgery and the GPs. I can say that there are several surgeries across Wales that do give people an opportunity to make appointments online. They can do that. They can phone up to make appointments. And it's the GP's choice, and that's something that they'll have to explain to their patients.
Lee Waters. Joyce Watson.
Diolch, Llywydd. You will be aware, of course, First Minister, that there is a consultation that is ongoing and that it doesn't finish until the 12th of July. And I did make a request here some weeks ago about having additional opportunities for people to take part in that consultation, and Aelodau'r Health Board did respond. I hope that you would reiterate again, because it is a consultation, nothing is fixed as yet, to encourage people, whoever they are, and particularly whatever their views are, so that they can be considered in the final document that will come out for consideration post-consultation.
It's right to say that no decisions have been made. It is hugely important, as I said, that there is the fullest possible consultation. I've not heard of any complaints around the consultation itself, although, of course, there will be strong views what the outcome should be. And as I've said before, it's hugely important that the Health Board maximises all opportunities to engage with the public.
Question 5.
Question 5, Bethan Syed.
Update on Natural Resources Wales' review into shooting on land that it manages.
Yes, I can say to the member that NRW is still considering the responses from the consultation, and Welsh ministers will need to fully consider any proposals that NRW produce.
Thank you for that reply. There's been understandable concern regarding the tender for the review of evidence into our NRW's shooting review. I understand that only one application was received, and one of the two academics employed to carry out the work is a self-admitted shooting enthusiast. I understand that NRW is, of course, an arm's-length body, but I and others have concern over the fairness of how this review has been conducted in light of that of which I've just explained. Polling shows that there is a clear move against having shooting on Welsh Government land, and I was wondering whether you would be committed in future such reviews to ensure that it is transparent and that people can hold the government to account, because I feel that it's failed in this regard, because people perhaps have not had the trust that they've wanted in this particular review because of the potential conflict of interest that one of the academics has.
The member raises an issue at which I'm not aware. Could I ask the Cabinet Secretary then to write to her to provide her with the reassurance that she would need? Obviously, it's a matter that needs addressing in more detail.
Angela Burns.
Presiding Officer.
First Minister, for my part, I'm quite relaxed about this because there were 19 experts involved in this process on behalf of NRW, starting from the economist, senior statistician, wildlife management and their ornithologist, woodland and spatial ecologist, recreation, health and wellbeing, team leader. I won't read out all 19. Where I do have a real concern is I believe that NRW have probably reached a position that they've put forward that is based on expert advice and opinion. However, there is also a very large petition that has been brought forward with a large number of signatures, a great number of whom appear to be from outside of Wales. So my question to you is this. Having had the first part of this consultation so rigorously put in place by NRW, are we able to apply the same rigour to those who might petition us from outside of our country as to what we should be doing in our country and on our land and by our people?
Well, those are matters really for the Commission in terms of the petition system. But I hear what she says. As far as we're concerned as government, obviously NRW will be guided by its consultation, and we are then guided by the views of NRW and, of course, looking at the consultation itself. So the petition system is one thing, but it's not formally part, of course, of government consultation.
Vicky Howells.
Yeah, Terry.
Okay, we'll move on. Question 6, Jenny.
Question 6, Jenny Rathbone.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. What additional action will the Welsh Government take to tackle air pollution in Cardiff?
Well, we've issued a direction to Cardiff Council requiring them to undertake a feasibility study to identify the option or options which will deliver compliance with the legal limits for nitrogen dioxide in the areas for which the authority is responsible in the shortest possible time.
Clearly, this is a very serious matter because we have the potential for further legal action from in the High Court hanging over us if we are not seen to be addressing this major health problem as quickly as possible. The Keolis Amy contract for delivering rail and metro is extremely welcome. The increased hi-fi on the trains will encourage more commuters to do the right thing and actually be working while they're travelling rather than sitting in a car. And the additional carriages and the additional frequency of trains is also very important to get that modal shift that we need. But I just wondered what work the Welsh Government's doing in conjunction with Transport for Wales to identify new tram routes to serve particularly east as well as south of Cardiff, which cannot benefit from upgrading of existing suburban rail lines. And additionally, what discussions has the Government had with Cardiff Council on the possibility and the need for a congestion charge or a levy?
Well, the matter of a congestion charge will be a matter for Cardiff Council. With the metro, the fundamental principle of the metro that I wanted to ensure was that it would be extendable. And that means, of course, the metro had to look like other modes of transport, such as light rail, because light rail is far easier to extend than heavy rail. And the first example of that will be the line down to the bay here in 2023, but there are other phases. East of Cardiff is badly served by the rail network. Cardiff Parkway will improve the situation, but that's not enough of itself. In future phases of the metro, there are plans to look at light rail stroke tram for the eastern part of Cardiff. I've seen the maps to make sure that the gap that does exist there is filled in the future. So the metro map as it is not meant to be the full extent of its reach, but there will be the opportunity to extend the metro via light rail into parts of Cardiff that have been poorly served in the past.
David Melding.
First Minister, many cities around the world are striving to become carbon neutral, some by as early as 2025, and this would obviously have a significant impact on air quality. The Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, has brought forward their target for carbon neutrality by a decade. We in the Welsh Conservatives have recognised the need for greater ambition here and have called for Cardiff to be the first carbon neutral capital city in the UK. I wonder if you share this type of ambition.
Ambitious. I think it's something that is potentially achievable. It's something I know that the Cabinet Secretary will want to achieve as well. We can't wait for the technology to deliver. the reductions we seek by themselves, but we do need to offer, of course, people a comfortable, reasonably priced, frequent service that lures them away from their cars. And that's what the Metro is intended to do, to make sure that people don't feel that the only way into work for them is to travel by car.
Simon Thomas.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. One of the reasons that Cardiff has suffered from poor air quality in the past and still does, according to recent court cases, is major polluting plants on the outskirts of Cardiff. Aberthaw, for example, has been taken to court on more than one occasion. It's really important, I think, as we develop our energy infrastructure, that we take the right tools, including environmental impact assessments, on any new developments. It's been of great concern for many in Wales that the Barry incinerator that was proposed and is still going ahead at the current time has not had a full environmental impact done on it. It's very difficult to judge the quality of air that will affect people in Barry and Cardiff if we don't do such an environmental impact. Now, I know the Environment Minister is considering whether to order such a full environmental impact. Will you, as First Minister, ensure that that is done for both the residents of Barry and for Cardiff and for the wider South Wales area?
Well, it is something that's under consideration, as the member says, by the Ministers for her to consider further. He is right to say that one of the things we need to do is to look at ways of reducing the carbon footprint of energy generation, which is why we need the tidal lagoon. Yeah, apparently, there was going to be an announcement yesterday. That's been delayed. Allegedly, an announcement towards the end of the week, if indeed the government is still in place at that point. Still nothing. I mean, all we have... he agrees with this, I know, but all we have asked for is that Wales should be treated in the same way as Hinckley. We're not asking for more than that, but give us the same fair play, the same what it takes as Hinckley has had. Now, it's up to the Conservative Party here in Wales and indeed in Westminster to show that they can deliver for Wales what they've already delivered to parts of England. That's their test. Can they show they're up to it?
Question 7, Mike.
Question 7, Mike Hedges.
Will the First Minister make a statement on efforts to tackle the problems caused by Japanese knotweed?
We do work with partner organisations in the public to tackle the threats of invasive non-native species in Wales. And I recognise that Japanese knotweed is a significant problem. We have actively funded innovative trials. Two things. First of all, chemical treatments, but secondly, biocontrol through using natural psyllid predators. Of course, you have to be careful doing that in case you introduce an even greater problem, as the Australians will tell you some of the things that they've done with sugarcane particularly. But nevertheless, those trials are ones that we have funded in order to get a grip to the problem.
Can I thank the First Minister for that response? Knotweed is a serious problem in Swansea, especially in my constituency, but I'm sure Julie James could tell you exactly the same for Swansea West as well. Whilst the experiment with the natural predator and improved chemical treatments will be welcomed, we have areas of green wedge where knotweed has become a problem. Has the Welsh Government got any plans for stopping green wedge land becoming fully infested by knotweed, so instead of being a green belt, it'll be a knotweed belt?
Well, ultimately, of course, it's up to the landowner to control Japanese knotweed on their land. I can say that we recently awarded £50,000 to 5 councils via the Green Infrastructure Funding Scheme to undertake a project to combat invasive non-native plant species at over 1,000 sites throughout those 5 counties. It'll also train community volunteers to help to control those plants, and we did recently publish an updated information sheet aimed at community and voluntary groups with advice on action on land they manage.
Susie Davis.
Diolch, Llywydd. They say that there are only certain things will survive a nuclear holocaust in this country, one being E. coli, the second being cockroaches, and the third, the certainty that this question will keep coming up on the order paper in this place. You may have heard recently that there have been some ideas that perhaps we should eat more of this Japanese knotweed, as it's full of vitamins and minerals. You can't eat our way out of this problem, obviously. So my main question to you is, have you had any information from local authorities that there has been any illegal dumping of Japanese knotweed in our landfill sites?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm sure that there are examples of it. I have not... That is a biocontrol method I've not heard proposed before. I wasn't aware that Japanese knotweed was in fact edible. I suppose I should add the caveat, if anybody's watching this, that do not try this at home until it's been fully tested. I'm told, well, the Leader of the House tells me it's quite horrible. I won't ask her whether that's personal experience or not, but it's not a recommendation from her. Edible but horrible. So that is the government line on the consumption of Japanese knotweed. There's an important point here. Knotweed is an incredibly invasive species, easy to move around, and of course it's hugely important that there are new ways sought to control it, but also of course that any kind of illegality regarding its dumping is dealt with as quickly as possible.
David Rowlands.
Well, it is a well recognised fact that Japanese knotweed is one of the most pernicious plants ever to be introduced to the British Isles. I understand that local councils have a duty to control knotweed infestations. As these infestations can blight private houses, it is essential that these controls are in place. And yet even a cursory observation of mostly urban areas show that control measures seem not to be being applied. Would the First Minister consider reissuing guidance and perhaps a reminder to local councils of their duty in this regard?
Well, I think I made reference just a little earlier to the guidance that we have recently provided, updated guidance, and the answer I gave to the member for Swansea East. That's aimed at community and voluntary groups, and that advises them on action that they can take, and local authorities, of course, will be aware of any statutory responsibilities that they have.
Question 8, Joyce Watson.
Question 8, Joyce Watson.
What consideration does the Welsh Government give to the Trans-European Transport Network in developing its transport plans?
Our investment in the road network to meet European standards and our continued lobbying for UK Government to invest in our 10T rail network demonstrates the importance we place on good transport connectivity with the rest of the UK and Europe.
And thank you for that answer. But planning ahead, there are examples of non-EU members being part of the 10T network. For example, Switzerland is. Is that something Cabinet has discussed in terms of post-Brexit planning? Because the extent to which we coordinate with the EU on improvements to our major transport infrastructure, our roads, rails, airports and seaports, will have a huge bearing on economic activity for decades to come. And Wales should look to maintain those bridges, even if England is intent on burning them.
The difficulty is geography, of course. I mean, we have to make sure that, that the network stays in place across the whole of southern Britain particularly. You don't have to be an EU member to be part of it. Switzerland is part of 10T, and they're not an EU member. And, of course, the network links two EU members, Ireland on the one hand, and the countries on the continent on the other. So there's no reason at all, rationally, why we shouldn't form part of that network. Only the most blinkered Brexiteer and flag waver could possibly think that being part of an integrated programme to improve transport links is some kind of European plot. So there is no reason why we shouldn't stay part of this network.
Russell George.
George Llywydd, can I ask First Minister how you are engaging with the UK government in regards to these routes? As clearly as you just pointed out, this is a matter that stretches across the border, and it's clear that important that both governments work together.
It is, and we do when we can. I mean, in his constituency, of course, he will know. He is seeing the new town bypass being constructed as we speak, which I know he's welcomed. He will have had the Four Crosses bypass as well, and then, of course, once through Llanymynech, the road starts to slow down, through Pant into Shropshire and beyond. And it can be difficult to engage the Department for Transport so that they understand how important roads that seem peripheral to them are in fact to us and to the communities that live along those roads as well in England. So we will always continue to work with government in England in order to make sure that our road network and indeed our rail network is as interconnected as possible.
Question 9, Lynn.
Question 9, Lynn Eagle.
Will the First Minister provide an update on discussions with the UK Government on Brexit?
Yes, we continue to use a range of channels for discussion, notably the JMC Plenary and European negotiations, EN. Most recently, at political level, there was the first meeting of the Ministerial Forum on EU negotiations on the 24th of May.
Thank you. I'm sure that the First Minister will have read with concerns details of the UK Government's plans for a so-called doomsday Brexit, under which the second worst scenario of us leaving the EU without a deal would lead to the Port of Dover collapsing, food shortages, fuel shortages and the NHS running out of medicines within 2 weeks. Can I ask the First Minister what discussions you've had with
the UK government about these so-called doomsday plans, and given that the UK government's handling of Brexit is becoming more shambolic by the minute, what assurances can you offer that we will not encounter disruption to key services like the NHS in Wales?
The problem we have is that we don't have a sensible government in London. We don't even have a government that is absolutely determined on a hard Brexit and absolutely determined to move it forward and come what may with a majority in Parliament. What we have is a mess, an absolute mess. David Davis returned from wherever he's been for the past few months to complain about Northern Ireland. A resignation again this morning of a government minister in London, not happy with the direction that the Tory government is taking. You know, we have a Prime Minister who is in a position of grave weakness, who has to appeal for unity within her own party because of the backstabbing that's taking place. We have our own Foreign Secretary thinking that Donald Trump should lead the negotiations and not his own party leader. Not his own party leader. I mean, you could not make this up. I mean, if I was a comedy writer, I mean, people would think this was too far-fetched. So we do need something more sensible, certainly in London. There's no question about that, because it's in no one's interest for this chaos to continue. So we've made the point, rationally and calmly, that people's views have to be respected. The referendum result has to be respected, but it has to be done in the most sensible way possible. There are those who support Brexit who say people voted in the referendum for the hardest Brexit possible. That's not what the election result last year taught us at all. People didn't vote for a hard Brexit. They were offered the opportunity by Theresa May to vote for a hard Brexit, and they said no. And that is the reality of the democratic position. When I see newspapers in London saying this is some great betrayal, they forget the result last year and what people actually voted for last year. My belief is what people want is they want the result of the referendum to be respected and for Brexit to happen, but they want it to be done in the most sensible and rational way possible and not in a way that damages the UK. And I have to say, one of the things that troubles me is that I don't believe the ports are in any way ready for a hard Brexit in March. We will then see delays at the ports. We will see lorries Dover, not just in Dover, potentially in the Welsh ports as well. Lorries backed up down the road, nowhere to park them, delays, goods going off, perishable goods. And what then will the UK government do? They'll blame the ports. They'll blame the ports. That's what they'll do. They'll say, well, Dover, it's your fault. You didn't invest properly, and it's not our fault. Gov, it's the fault of the ports. Or they'll come to us and say, the delays in Holyhead and Pembroke Dock and Fishguard are your problem because the Welsh government controls the ports. Well, that's not good enough. I mean, if there's going to be planning for a hard Brexit, which is happening, and in some ways you can understand why that's happening, prepare for the worst, then there has to be money on the table to help our ports to deal with the inevitable consequences and delays that will actually occur. And that hasn't happened. Instead, what we're getting is nothing happening, and the potential, I think, for ports to be told, any delays are your fault.
Mark Reckless.
First Minister for his statement. Of course, it would be for the UK government to decide what, if any, restrictions or customs it wanted to put or not put on goods coming into the country. But First Minister, you made it clear earlier that your government still supports staying in a customs union with the EU and staying in the single market. Previously, you have suggested you respect the referendum result and there shouldn't be a second referendum. However, you're no longer able to claim that that is the position of your government, because you allow ministers to speak out and say that notwithstanding the vote of Wales and the UK in that referendum, we shouldn't have that and they should be made to vote again. Do you not understand that if the position is that there has to be another vote on any deal, all you do is incentivise the European Commission not to offer any attractive negotiating arrangement?
Why does he hold the electors of Britain in such contempt? People have decided what's going to happen. They have an equal say in how it's going to happen. They're not excluded at that point. Thanks, you all voted, from now on you're an irrelevance. That's what he's saying to the people of Britain. Now, I don't advocate a second referendum on the issue. The referendum's been. His party did after the 1997 referendum. They went into the general election in 2005 with a commitment for a second referendum on devolution. So they're bad losers. They're bad losers on that side. We accept the result that was that we saw 2 years ago. But surely it is right that the people of Britain should decide how Brexit happens. It's not for the elites in the UK government to decide how it happens. It's for the people. And I don't see why there is such fear in Westminster amongst the Conservative Party of allowing people to say on how Brexit happens. People have decided the direction. They have every right to determine how the car is driven.
Thank you, First Minister. The next item is the